Achim here, InnerSpace Explorers. So, I made this posting where I said that I'm gonna start the restoration of this jet scooter, and basically that's what I did last weekend with 2 cameras. Normally my videos are all made with a phone, so I was like, no, let's do this better. So 2 cameras, and the result is one of them had no SD card, actually a corrupted SD card, and the other one had no battery. So I was explaining an hour how to disassemble and everything in detail about the scooter, and in the end there was no video. So fantastic. So I need to do this again, which I will do one of the next days. So actually I know I'm a little bit behind with my videos, and but today I just want to cover something else, and basically that is the beginning of my rebreather journey and why I end up with the KISS. And that's based on a question somebody sent me, and was probably also due to the discussions that I had with Dominic online. And I initially thought this is probably a good video for Dominic and myself, explaining a little bit how our rebreather journey started and why we went through which unit, etc. But in fact he started with an inspiration and he's still diving it, which is awesome, but obviously not great for that discussion, so I'm doing this alone. And so yeah, the question was like, yeah, how comes you're still diving a KISS? There's so many sophisticated, super duper electronic rebreathers, and there's was so much development and involvement over the last couple of years in rebreather technology, and you're still promoting this dinosaur rebreather. Well, I am a dinosaur, so I'm promoting a dinosaur rebreather. But all joking aside, let me tell you a little bit about my rebreather journey. Those of you who read my book actually know how it's all started, but for this video I'll actually go through all of this once more. So my very first rebreather dive I did when I was 11 years old. So for those of you who don't know, I started diving when I was 7, and more or less autodidact. So I had somebody who showed me the basics, let's say. Inhale, exhale, equalize, come back to the surface, and from there basically the journey was all on my own. So I was more or less self-taught, and so I read a lot, all these books, Hans Haas, Jacques Cousteau, and obviously I read about the oxygen rebreathers that Hans Haas was using back in the day. And when I was 11, there was a big flea market actually at the Olympic Stadium in Munich, and so I was running around there with a friend, and I found this rebreather. In fact, it was a Draeger mine rescue unit, and I put a picture here from one that I basically just stole from the internet because I don't have any old ones from mine, but that's basically the same unit. And so I just realized that's a rebreather. I was an older guy, and I talked to him a little bit about this rebreather, and he explained, yeah, there's this this filter cartridge, and the gas goes through the filter cartridge, and you can inhale it again, just fill it with oxygen, etc. You know how it works. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And I had a friend, a very close friend of mine, who had an older brother, and that older brother was at the volunteer firefighters, and they had a filling station. And he was also always filling my scuba tanks, which basically were old firefighting tanks, 4 and 7 liters. Actually, my very first set of dive gear is sitting there. That was what I got when I was 8 years old. That's an old PA 38 from Draeger. I didn't have this mask. This one came later, basically just to have the entire thing. But that's the regulator, and I don't know if you can see that, but that's a pretty yeah, it's made so it fits the mask, and it's basically has a round tube that fits in that mask. So I basically had some little cork plates and some tape around it so I could hold it with my teeth, and that's what I was using for the first couple of years. So anyway, So I got this rebreather, and this guy was able to fill me these oxygen tanks, or this oxygen tank. And then I went diving with it. There's a quarry, yeah, bicycle distance from my parents, old quarry that was left open probably in the 60s. So for me, late 70s, that was paradise. The thing was 12 meters deep. There was a little bit of a tunnel where they probably originally stored machinery and equipment. So you could actually penetrate that tunnel about 20 meters. And it was a pretty wild era, so to speak. And so I went there with this oxygen rebreather. And the funny thing is that I survived this because nobody told me that you have to do something to this filter. So the filter was just, I opened it up and it was a solid greenish block of something. So I don't know how long the CO2 absorbing material had been in there, but when I bought it, probably for years. So it was no particles anymore. It was just one solid block. And I was like, oh, okay, that's the filter. So I probably did, I don't know, 15, 20 dives with this thing, and then just basically couldn't stand it anymore. I always had a terrible headache after it, and I always felt like really bad underwater. Guess why? And so I threw this thing in the corner, and it took me actually a couple of years to figure out, like, oh, you need to switch out this absorbent from time to time. And yeah, so then this thing was completely rotten, and I threw it away probably when I was, I don't know, 15, 16 or something like that. And then the next rebreather experience was actually in the US. And that was with a Biomarine 500, so the Navy unit with the spheres. And I mean, that was basically the beginning of a lifelong passion, so to speak. So that really hit the trigger. So this oxygen rebreather thing was an interesting story, but it actually created more negative feelings towards rebreather than positive ones. And but this Biomarine unit, that was freaking awesome. So at that point I was I think 19, 20, and had way more than 1,000 dives, and was already diving technical-ish. So had my first experience with helium, etc. So that basically changed everything. And then obviously I figured out that I can't afford one of these units. They were ridiculous expensive back then, and I still have none, so that's actually something that I would still probably give my left arm for. I mean, I would also buy one that's not working, just from the collecting standpoint of view, but one that's in working condition would be an absolute dream. So if you have one, let me know. My left arm's free. But yeah, and then it actually didn't take me too long till I finally got my first kiss. So I had a sports kiss for, yeah, I was able to use it, but it was not mine, so I could borrow that from time to time, and I was playing around a little bit with it. And actually I got one a couple of weeks ago. That's actually on its way from the US, so there will be a video soon where I introduce that to you, and I'll dive it here and I'll show you. Actually pretty cool. Actually a relatively rare unit. I think there's way less than from the Classic Kiss. And then at some point I got a Classic Kiss, and then I basically did hundreds of dives on the Classic Kiss and became my main rebreather. And then actually, as there was so much interest in rebreathers from my side, I always started to play around with whatever I could find. So when I had the chance to get on a unit, I always did it. So I can remember when the Inspiration came out, and there was all these discussions on the internet if this is safe or if it's not, and good or bad, whatever. And I figured out that most people that discussed there on the internet never had their hands on one of these units. So I actually drove to Denmark and made a course on this unit, because I never had the intention to get one, but I wanted to know what it is all about so I can make an educated decision, and if somebody asks a question, I could give an educated answer. And I basically kept this philosophy till today. So when I get my hands on a rebreather, I try to get a dive in. So I'm certified on the Ouroboros, for example. Obviously Dover JJ. So everything that you can find on the market, I have some sort of experience with. What I didn't dive so far is a Liberty, but most of the rebreathers that are on the market, I think I have at least one dive. And then on the other hand, there's this obviously this love for oxygen rebreathers, and over the years I think I designed and built 6-7 different units, and a lot of them actually popped up when we moved last year. So there is boxes in this mayhem here with these old rebreathers. So I might come up with a video series where I show you a little bit what I made there and how it worked, and tell you a little bit more about that. So yeah, let me know if that's something that you would be interested in seeing, and then I'll see if I can do that. Yeah, and then obviously, I mean, you know, I have this background with GE, and then there for a while the rebreather thing was like, you can't dive rebreathers, this is evil stuff, don't touch it. And I can remember at that time I had also, for example, an Draeger FGT, this old military unit. So I put a picture here. It's actually me with the unit in Starnberger See, and I got actually burned and crucified a couple of times for just using these. And at the same time I had a lot of this Russian stuff, IDA 71, 72. There's a couple of oxygen rebreathers. There's another picture of me in a Russian oxygen rebreather, and so I was playing around with a lot of that stuff. And then obviously was the fridge and the RB80. So for me it actually started with an RB80, and then I had the chance to buy a fridge from somebody, but that was more like a display piece, and actually later on I sold it to somebody, I think in Poland. I don't know if this guy's still diving it or where it is. I actually regretted that a couple of times. It would have been a nice piece of kit for my collection. And then I switched from a RB80 to a Hyperion, which I actually still have sitting there. And there's a video on this channel. I'll put a link in the here card. There is a video where I actually rediscovered that and put it back into service and dove it a couple of times. And yeah, then came the Gastoro, the oxygen rebreather. Then I had a look into the Triton for a while, but that yeah, I don't want to go deeper into that. And then came the Go, which is basically a KISS. So it's still a KISS and Go KISS, so to speak. And to answer the question, why do I still dive the KISS? Well, through all those years and all those units, it's still the rebreather that perfectly fits my philosophy. So the rebreather is not doing anything. It's just providing data, and based on that data I make a decision. So I'm in charge 100%, and it gives me a lot of time. So I was diving a Hollis for quite a while, Prism 2, and I can remember a dive in Egypt, deep wreck dive, close to 100 meters, inside the wreck, in a sort of restriction, and the solenoid stuck. Which means you have to react immediately. So that unit is forcing you to react, and obviously in the worst moment of the dive. And that I hate it. So if I'm in the same position with my KISS, and let's say I'm stuck in a wreck, visibility is bad, whatever, it just doesn't bother me because that rebreather is not forcing me to do anything. I know from my experience that I can probably breathe 10-15 minutes from that unit without doing anything, without running into issues. I mean, my PO2 is decreasing slowly. Yeah, well, fine, fair enough. But just from experience, I know very well how long I can breathe from this thing without adding more oxygen before I run into any hypoxic issues. And if I, after 5 minutes, like, I don't know, and I press the button once, nothing will happen. I mean, in the meaning of like elevated PO2s and dangerous levels, etc. So it's a super safe, simple, intuitive unit. And from all the years where we did rebreather tryout dives, so I can remember there was a time when I had like 8 different units flying around, and we did a lot of weekends where people can try out different rebreathers, etc. And there was a lot of experienced divers, and they went on a full ECCR, something like that, and they really struggled. I mean, experienced people with their skills and everything, and they were like, oh, this is completely new. Everybody that went on the KISS was just basically diving it. There was no like, oh, this is hard, and it just felt very very comfortable, very familiar, and was basically easy to dive, which in my opinion is just proves the fact that this is a bulletproof machine. And that brings me to the last point why I really like this rebreather. I can go to the most remote place on Earth, and there's basically nothing that can go wrong on this rebreather or that can break that I can't fix with a Swiss Army knife, so to speak. This is, of course, a little bit overdone, but I mean, counterlungs, for example. I mean, these counterlungs are drinking bags. They're like $20. I mean, you can bring spares. It's not a problem. If you have some sophisticated ECCR where the counterlung's probably 800 euros, I mean, how many spares do you want to bring? And I've been on an expedition with somebody in Oman with a rebreather, I don't want to say which one, which actually had a punctured counterlung, and this guy had to rent a 80 cubic feet cylinder and a poodle jacket and dive with this instead of his rebreather that he brought all the way from Europe, which was a nightmare. So I never had any issues. I had a broken tower because the airline was handling my equipment like shit. But I found somebody local that could basically help me out with a lathe. Can't remember where that was. I think somewhere in Lanzarote or so. And so it's all fixable. I mean, unless you break the head or something, but then, yeah, I mean, it's more or less a total loss that would actually destroy every rebreather. But it's such a simple, bulletproof machine. And that's something that I found really, really appealing. And same goes for the Go. The super simple shrinked KISS, which makes tons of fun to dive. And there's, again, I mean, my kids were trying the Go, and they were like, oh, that's easy. And before all the hammering starts, yeah, they're too young for that, and they will not dive it like their regular unit or whatever. But obviously, I mean, they grow up in this circus here, in between tons of dive gear from whatever you can imagine, including the submarine. So obviously they want to try out, and they are super comfortable divers. So I was like, yeah, let's go in a pool and you play with the unit. I explained it to you, and it was not like, oh, this is super new and I can't handle that. They put it in and dove it for an hour in the pool, and they had tons of fun. So just another proof that this is a very, very simple, intuitive unit, and same goes for the classic KISS. Yeah, so far so good. I hope that answers the question. That's a little bit of a long one, but maybe we have more questions based on that video, or you guys decide you want to see some of my oxygen rebreather builds or whatever. So just let me know. I'm looking forward to your comments, and also I'm looking forward, obviously, to your rebreather story. So what rebreather are you diving, and why did you choose this one, and what were the steps? I mean, how did you end up with the unit you're diving? So let me know in the comments. Really looking forward to that, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.